All righty. Good afternoon, America and the world. Today is Monday, October. It's October 28th, 2024, and we are in national election season. I hope you have joined the millions of American citizens who have already exercised their right to vote. The only excuse for not voting is that you just don't care about your country, your neighbors, and your welfare. Surely, if we vote and vote intelligently and humanely, our rejoicing shall rise high as the listening skies. You are viewing Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network. I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. My goal is to enlighten your perspectives about our environment, our socio-political struggles, those banes of classism and racism that make all of our lives more difficult than they should be. And in so doing, our hope is to bring all of us, all of us together in a human tapestry of brotherhood and sisterhood, bound together by threads of understanding, respect, and tolerance of our physical, racial, and religious differences. Hopefully, we can have a discussion of ideas based on facts, not fiction, that will encourage us to think critically and not emotionally. Let there be no doubt the voice of WCEG is in concert with those that ring with the harmonies of liberty. Now, if you're currently watching, we thank you. Inform your neighbors, friends, and associates that we can be viewed live via YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and over streaming devices such as Roku. Our podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, and JioSaavn platforms. All of our programs are archived on YouTube and can be viewed by anyone, excuse me, at any time. Now, please understand that the topics and opinions that you hear today on Issues and Answers are those of the host and my guest host, and not the WCEG Network. So let's get moving on this installment of Issues and Answers. I'd like to welcome our guests who are sitting with us today. These are members of the direct descendants of the Harris Neck community. And with us today, we have Ms. Fran Timmons, Mr. Darrell Dunham Jr., and Ms. Margaret Findley. Welcome, everybody, to Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network. I think, Ms. Timmons, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
And we're all together. Good, good, great, great.
Yes,
Glad to have you.
I am.
Before we get into conversation, and I know I just introduced the two of you, the three of you. I'd like to introduce some folks who I don't want to be forgotten. They would be Jacqueline Cruz Carter of Jacksonville, Cynthia Gibbs of Jacksonville, Charles L. Houston of Darien, William Johnson Jr. of Atlanta, Carlotta McIntosh of Jacksonville, Isaiah Thomas of Jacksonville, and Queen Welch of Atlanta. These were the people that we know who lost their lives at the gangway collapse at Sapelo Island.
Yeah.
And probably it's their deaths that bring us all here together today, not only to discuss what happened with them, but also what is happening to the Harris Neck community, which I think is going to be revealing and shocking to most of our public. So, Fran Timmons, could you, or Mr. Darrell Dunham, could you give us a little bit of background on your group and your mission?
So
The DDH&C is a group that's here located in Harris Neck that is comprised of members of the original Harris Neck community that existed on the land that is now known as the Harris Neck National Wildlife Refuge from sometime in the 1860s, 70s, I believe, up until 1942 when the land was condemned for a U.S. Army Air Force base. To give a little bit of background on the Harris Neck situation, in 1942, if I'm not mistaken, the McIntosh County local government designated Harris Neck, Georgia, as the central location or the main location that a U.S. Army air base would be placed here in McIntosh County. This community was made up of around 80 families. Majority of those families were Black. And I forgot what month it was, but in 1942, essentially they came down, they appraised the land, they gave a value, and they basically told people either you sell and we take it, or we take it anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it, essentially. So they appraised the land, values were assigned. Once people had sold the land, they thought that they would be given a certain amount of time to leave. The government came in essentially 2 days before they were told to leave, before they had to leave, and told them, if whatever you can carry, you can carry. After that, it's going to be destroyed because the land was officially condemned. Around after World War II, the air base was essentially abandoned and the land was given back to McIntosh County. McIntosh County was reportedly supposed to handle all of the reacquisition of the land for the community that was here. That did not happen. The county essentially used the land for all types of nefarious acts, and the land was not returned back to the community. So essentially around 20 years go by with the land not being returned back to the community. The U.S. government came down to Harris Neck to see what was going on because nothing had been done with the land. And they found out everything that had been done. A lot of the structures that were still standing on the land had essentially been destroyed because of the actions of the county. And all of the land had essentially grown up. It had become all wildlife. They just had essentially taken over. So when the U.S. government came in back in 1965, I believe, they came in and they took the land. They didn't really know what to do with it at the time, so they turned it into a wildlife refuge because Harris Neck, essentially, this area had become essentially a rookery for a lot of birds that have been going extinct at the time and things of that nature. And I'll let Ms. Fran talk about a lot of what happened after that because as a Fish and Wildlife Service employee, I'm not too personally into everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up to 1979.
Okay.
All right. It was always a very strong desire for the original landowners to go back home, so to say, the original Harris Neck community. Let me share just a little of what the community was all about that had these people, my family members, so in prayer to go back home. That was their main motive, their main topic was to go back home, their desire to go back home. The place was so beautiful. Approximately 75 Black families lived there. And not only was it so beautiful, but they were in my vision, they were prosperous. They were very prosperous. They had their own church, a beautiful church with electricity in it. One of the assessors said it definitely was way beyond a Black church, the status of it, the condition of it, the upkeep of it was just extraordinary. And sis, you can chime in with me because you know this is really hard when we're trying to talk about our grandparents' land. And this is a picture of them. This is a picture of granddaddy and the grandmom Fran. They owned over 300 acres, whereas granddad had his own oyster factory. And Grandma Frances, she was a beautiful seamstress. She was so good that she was able to make wedding dresses and all beautiful things like that. So, and by the way, also he was the chairman of that beautiful church that I just mentioned, I talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. So they were very intelligent, very industrious. And solely independent, independent. They didn't ask if anything. People were coming to them for help and assistance. So in the back of my mind is generational wealth. Hello.
Yes, absolutely.
All of that had been established for us, the grands and great grands to come. And for it to just be taken away like that, wow, that is very sorrowful. It really is. So I'm going to let my sister say something. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Ms. Finley.
Okay, yes. The community was very self-sufficient, just as she said. The residents, they owned their lands, they had their own deeds. They had a school because they believed in education. They had a Rosenwald school. Of course, the history of the Rosenwald school is very rich. It involves Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. So they had one of the Rosenwald schools. They had post office. They had their local stores, and it was all in the community. So it was a self-sustaining, and it was a very self-sufficient community that didn't go out for rarely anything. But when this happened to them, the community was devastated, and the people moved in a very short period of time without any kind of preparation. They were not given any kind of preparation or help to move. There were people with family that had to live on the side of the road. It was just a very, very bad time. And this happened July 27, 1942. So.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on in this country at that around that time. Yes.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And a lot of people, I'm sure, share with us in this trauma, in this land trauma loss that we suffer with today.
Yeah. The trauma is so real.
Can you explain to us what land trauma is, just to our viewers?
Well, land loss trauma is when you were on a piece of land that was your lifestyle, that was your life, and it was taken away from you, not because you didn't pay for it, not because you had done something bad or anything. It was taken away from you for the government use in eminent domain.
Okay.
And you have, like my sister was saying about, they always wanted to go back home. And we lived that as well as a second generation, because they would, talk about it. Old Harris Neck is what they would say, no Harris Neck. And it was just something that has always been a part of us as well. And so, it's very it has a lot of meaning and a deep relationship and to the land. So you feel the loss.
Yeah, yeah. You feel the loss. And when you come down to the original Harris Nut, you not only feel the loss, we don't just feel the loss, but we see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to just go back a little bit before we come up to date. When the people were basically told to move from their land and they were compensated, what type of compensation did they receive for their land?
From what I understand, they were given, this is just what we have in paperwork. I don't know for certain, but what we were told is that the land was appraised. They were given, I have like a sheet that lists all of the values, but they were given money for the land as far as I understand. Now, what actually happened, I'm not 100% certain, but from the paperwork that we do have, there were monetary values given to the land.
One of the reasons I asked that, because it was said that people had to sit along the side of the road to live for a while. So I'm assuming that that compensation wasn't sufficient for people to move into decent housing at another location.
No.
Not only that, but they didn't have enough time to find anywhere to live. So
right.
When you come into Harris Neck now,
yeah.
Coming into Harris Neck Road, you're coming off of I-95, getting on 17. Once you get off of 17, you come down Harris Neck Road. And all along the road, especially when you get close to the refuge, you can see a lot of the houses that people stay in now. And the where they ended up staying on the side of the road at. People like Miss Fran now live in what is now considered New Harris Neck.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that land was owned by other people or wasn't being used. Also, they were staying on the side of the road. There was no housing structures that they had time to build. So it was essentially just like a 2-day turnaround.
Who came back first? The original descendants of the Harris Neck community, or rich folks like R.J. Reynolds and a few others who built property on the land?
Well, some never left because there was a promise made.
Okay.
So I have a statement here
Mm-hmm.
that I'd like to share with everyone.
Sure.
This is from my auntie, Mrs. Ethel Campbell. And it says, at that time, she was 69. And she said, the government official came to her home in July of 1942 and told her husband and their 6 small children to leave the land where they were born. The Campbells owned 10 acres and a small house not far from the waterfront property where Mrs. Campbell's father operated a small oyster canning factory. Quote, she said, we had to hire a mule and wagon to carry our goods out. Mrs. Campbell said, we didn't have a truck or a car. As they were leaving, she said, military workers and bulldozers were already tearing down their house and plowing up the crops in the field. She said, it worried me so to see them tearing up our fine crop of corn. She said, I used to wake up at night crying about it. And although the government paid the landowners for their property, Auntie said, many did not have enough money to build new homes right away. So where did they stay? Many of them who did not have anywhere else to go, or families elsewhere, pitched tents along the side of the road. And those tents just provided just a little covering, covering. It was inhumane.
Yeah. We're talking less than concentration camps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said most camped out for months. Months. That's unbelievable. But it's true. For months. And she went on to say even some slept under makeshift shelters and bushes and cooked over open fires.
Yeah, when you say makeshift shelters, I assume you're talking about bushes, because that's all that's there. That's just sad. Now,
yeah, very sad. I'd just like to add that if you can imagine, like my grandfather going from 312 acres to 3 acres, you can only imagine the type of loss that he felt and the way that he had to settle his family and his loss. So that's the kind of land loss and trauma that I'm talking about.
I mean, how do you recover from that? You just mentioned earlier, talking about generational wealth, and this is something that's stripped away from you, and then a self-sufficient community is forced to live in conditions that are similar to prisoners of war. In fact, less than that. And you had no one to reach out to, no agencies to reach out to for help. You were just left there.
That's right. That's it.
So how did it come about that many of you were able to come back to Harris Neck? Those who wanted to come back, how did that come about?
A lot of the people that are still in the community now stayed in the community, and so we have a lot of elders that are in the community, as well as a lot of people whose families were still raised up here in Harris Neck, in what is now New Harris Neck. There, unfortunately, and I'm doing right now a genealogy report through the DDH and Fish and Wildlife Service. And what I found in the work that I've done is that a lot of people did end up moving. So you had some people that did move to Brunswick, they never came back. You had some people who moved to Jacksonville, they never came back. Some people that moved to Tampa, they didn't come back. Some people that moved to Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, they didn't come back. Some people moved to Texas. A lot of people did move to inland McIntosh County, but they haven't really come back to Harris Neck. I can speak to myself, my family are Morans. I have some Morans in my family, which is Miss Frank's family as well. And the side of my family that I know, I didn't really come back to Harris Neck. And as a matter of fact, I knew about Harris Neck, but the Harris Neck situation, I didn't really know. I heard things about it because I've been attending Miss Fran and Miss Margaret's brother's church essentially all my life. That's my family's church on my mom's side in Riceboro, Georgia. And I heard, about the Harris Neck story, but I was young, so I really didn't pay attention to it. And one day my aunt called me and told me that Miss Fran needed help on creating a Facebook page for the organization. And so when I was sitting there, it was me, Miss Margaret, Miss Fran, and their mother, Mother Dolly, were in the house. And I was just getting, filled in a little bit on the information about Harris Neck. all of the stuff that I learned in that day was more than I had heard about Harrison my whole life. And so we really didn't know. I didn't know about what happened here. Most of the people that have moved from here don't really know what happened. And a lot of the elders that were here, according to stories that, I've been told, didn't really talk about it much, just because it was something that was so traumatic that they didn't want to relive that or pass that down to the children. And so it'd be one of those things where maybe the elders would speak about it every once in a while, or they'd slip up and talk about it, but for the most part, just a lot of people kind of lost those stories.
This is very similar to people that I have spoken to and interviewed who are descendants of people or survivors of the Holocaust, where their families talked very little, the survivors talked very little about what happened, and perhaps maybe not until later on in life did this come out for the children. A lot of them had to do this research on their own because it was so painful, the memories, that people don't want to talk about it. So for our viewers and listeners, we're talking about the essence of what this land trauma actually means. It's actually something that's palpable and something that's real, and it affects not just the people that it occurred to directly, but obviously it's passed down through generations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking, the family, our parents believed in God, believed in education. Actually, the original Harrison, that culture that was built on spirituality, education, endurance, and entrepreneurship. Preserving and passing down that culture down to us motivated our parents to be sure that we receive the best education we possibly could have received down here. And once we graduated from high school, we knew we were going to seek higher education. So we left. We had to leave to pursue that. However, we found wonderful jobs and we did very good. But after that, then it was time for us to retire. And once we retired, we said, okay, we're back home.
Right.
We're going back home. And that's where we are. We're back home. And we're home to do some good work. And never, ever forget about what we once had, believing that we will get some of the land back. We'll be able to school, the Rosenwald School. That's a dream, but it can also become a reality. Getting some of the land back. It's a dream, it's a prayer, it's a wish, but we can get some of it back.
One of the things when we talk about the land, I don't want us to overlook this because I've had a little bit of background information about people losing their land, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were some issues where the people went out and sought legal aid and were supposedly given what we call pro bono legal aid, but they wound up signing away their land. Do you know about that? Where the lawyers took over the land?
No, I'm not.
Okay. That was something that I heard, where there was some legal finagling for some people who came back, and they actually lost their land to provide the property. These were properties along the coastal region that are now resorts or hotels or something like that that's built up.
There have been cases of that in Hilton Head, even in Southeast Georgia.
Yeah.
in Florida, along a lot of these Gullah Geechee areas, there have been a lot of land that is basically, like you said, been, put in the hands of different trusts and things of that nature, and land has been lost and things of that nature have happened. I know you brought up earlier about the Sapelo situation, and I'm going to keep this brief and be respectful to the people who are going through on Sapelo. But if you have any background on that, it's one of the ongoing fights on Sapelo at the current moment. So that we do see examples of that in the Southeast.
Yeah, one thing I just mentioned earlier, that the incident that happened in Sapelo really typifies a lot of the tragedy that has happened to this community. And when we look at that, and we can, people were going, oh my God, and then 2 days later, everyone's forgotten about it. But those families are going to live with that tragedy for a long time. And it's something that experts say that should never have happened. But then the basic land grab and the loss of self-worth, the generational wealth that you spoke of, the fact that people lost a lot of their independence. I think when you look at it collectively, I don't know. I know about Wrightsboro, several other communities that this happened to, and these all seem to be predominantly African American communities.
Yes.
There are communities in Kentucky that I know about. There are communities in Philadelphia that I know about. Wilmington, North Carolina, where my family lives. Very, very similar, where properties were basically taken or bought cheaply. The way you buy cheaply is that you condemn it, just give the people whatever you feel like they can get. That's the trick that people don't know. You can't just hold out for the best price, because the government will say, okay, if you don't want this, take it or leave it. We're just giving you this, and you're done. A lot of people don't know how devastating eminent domain can be.
Yes.
It's a devastating tool that has hurt hundreds of communities, scores of communities, if not hundreds. What's going on now with you, and how are you trying to resolve some of the reacquisitioning some of the land, some of the property? How is that going? Are you in contact with state officials, because the state owns a considerable amount of that community, the land on the islands there? Am I correct with that?
So I can speak to this to a certain extent. I'm a contracted employee through something called ACE to the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Mm-hmm.
So we currently have an MOU with the Direct Descendants of Harris Neck community. And one of the lines in the MOU speaks directly to land reacquisition. I can't speak to that process or what that currently looks like right now. A lot of that stuff is, confidential and
sure, absolutely.
But what I can say is that discussions are open, and the community and the Fish and Wildlife Service is actively working together today. Down here in Harris Neck, we do a lot of special events. The community working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the main one of which is the annual commemoration of the 1942 Harris Neck Community Diaspora, which commemorates, so a lot of people will say celebrates, and that's not what it is. It commemorates what happened on July 27th, 1942.
Right.
The main commemoration activity being we do a walk from the entrance of the refuge, where most people were told they had to leave, up to the church that exists now, which is a First African Baptist Church of Harris Neck Community, of Harris Neck, which actually contains parts from the old church that stood before here on the land that is now the refuge. And so we were working together actively as a community in refuge. And that's pretty much all I can go into right now.
Okay.
Right, right. We have made some progress working together. DDAC and Fish and Wildlife, and we're just so thankful that we have this working relationship, because there was a time when we could not even go to the graveyard, the cemetery.
Wow.
It was all closed up, everything. And it was so hard. It was so hard to be so close to it, and yet barbed wire and gates with 1,000-pound locks on it. Just, but it was a very bad time. It was a very, very bad time. So there were some things that happened from 1979 up to 2000. But I'm just going to shine or shed some light on where we are, DDANC, where we are.
Okay.
Since we have been working together, I think that we have certainly accomplished much more than what we've had before. Okay.
Please enlighten us. Thank you. Yes. I think it's great that there's progress that's coming. Have any government officials actually that come to and visited and talk with your community? I don't mean local officials, but people from the state or even federal government.
We've actually, from the Fish and Wildlife Service, we've had the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service down here for the commemoration last year.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, she's actually a cabinet member, and she came down along with some other upper level members of the Fish and Wildlife Service. So this situation and the partnership that we have between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the agency is recognized all the way up to DC.
Okay, that's great. Just want to make sure you're not forgotten. If I may, Ms. Timmons, you had some people in your family were injured in the in the gangway collapse. Isn't that correct? Is that correct?
Not family per se, but one of the members of the Gullah Geechee, the dancers,
the
shouters, yes.
Okay.
And I was there. I was there. I was there. Enjoying the cultural affair that was going on. It was really sweet. It was good. And just to see everyone, all of the children there, just so happy. And they had booths and set up where you can buy little trinkets and all of these things. It was just great. The McIntosh County shouters were there. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful occasion.
And this is the annual event, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the annual event. But maybe around about 1 o'clock, something just said to me, "Hey, it's time to go." So I did tell our family, and wow, we were the last ones to actually go over the gangway. And
before the tragedy.
Yeah, before the
Yeah.
tragedy. We made it back to Meridian. And folks are just screaming, like, "Are you all okay? Are you all okay?" And I said, what are you talking about? What? And is,
I know it's harm. It's deeply
especially when
traumatized.
all them and everybody was just wonderful and doing good, and all of a sudden this happened.
Yeah.
We
No.
No, go right ahead.
I was just gonna say there are a few people
No.
from McIntosh County who did end up injured.
Yeah.
But as of right now, from the last I heard, there's a few people that are still in the hospital.
Yeah, Joanne is still in the hospital. She's one of the Macintosh shouters, and I spoke to her just the other day, and she had to have 2 surgeries.
Wow.
On her ankle, and she said once she's released, she will go to rehab. She will not go home. She will have to go to rehab.
Going to rehab. That's an indication of how serious her injuries.
Well, she had surgeries on the same.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's not just being treated, it's being sent home. That's what I'm saying, that there's when you have to go to rehab, the injuries are very, very serious.
No.
So Miss Finley, do you make trips back? How often do you visit that community, or do you visit?
Actually, I live down in Harris Neck. I have a home in Atlanta because that's where my career was, and I retired and moved on back down to Harris Neck. In fact, I'll be there on the 5th to put my vote in. So I'm going to be going home especially for that. But when I just happened to be in Atlanta at the time because I came up for the Stevie Wonder concert.
You and many others, yes.
Had a great time. Yeah. And then I just happened to look at my phone as we were leaving, and I saw where this horrific accident had happened on Sapelo, and I knew my family were going there that day because we were invited to go with my niece, who has produced a coloring book of the native plants of the Gullah-Geechee plants that a lot of us have used all of our lives for different reasons. And I was like, I called Fran immediately to see if everybody was, what was going on. I was like in shock, and my daughter, we were like, "Oh no, call!" I mean, it's just like, what's happening? And of course, Fran explained everything that was going on, and I've heard even more about a couple of ministers that jumped in the water to help people, that was in the water. Lots of sad stories are there to talk about this horrific accident.
Yeah, I understand that now they have a new policy where they're limiting the amount of weight on the gangways. That's
okay. I hadn't heard that part, but I did hear that they were back in operation. So.
Yeah, there's only people don't realize there's only one boat that transports people back and forth from the mainland to that island. There are no stores, so that's how people have to get their food and life essentials is using that boat. That's
yes, our classmates, how they would get to school, they would take that boat, from that island over to the mainland where the school was, and that's how they were educated.
And that's a state-run the ferry, the state runs that ferry, if I'm correct. Okay.
Yeah. We were very fortunate to have a brief conversation with one of the residents on Sapelo Island, and just the other day, and I told her that we're going to do everything that we can possibly to support them, So there is going to be a beautiful prayer visual. I know that prayer visuals have been going on, and organizations, churches, and all have been really doing their best to support Sapelo Island during this time, this sad time. And on Wednesday, there will be another prayer visual where I'll be there to sing,
Okay.
give comfort if I can. I don't know. I'll probably just cry myself.
Play that piano.
I do play.
Yeah.
I do play, and that piano gives me a lot of comfort. Yes.
One thing I failed to cover, and we should just, if we can go back to that for just a minute, and we were talking about land trauma, and this is not just something that's centered in the Harris Neck community. I believe you're involved in an organization that's dealing with that throughout many southern and coastal regions. Is that correct?
We've had organizations to come offering help and assistance to us.
The Fish and Wildlife Service and the DD agency have been working closely with the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Board.
Yes.
Yeah, and the organization that's in Mississippi, I think it's
Mon Bayou.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, them too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that organization, that they deal, I think, specifically a lot with land loss.
Okay, because it's happening. It's happened in a lot of different places. That's what I want to emphasize, and I don't think America is aware of it or just ignores that fact that when we talk about why some folks living in poverty, a lot of these people had everything taken away from them.
Thank you.
And when you start off behind the 8 ball, and I mean way behind the 8 ball, it may take generations to struggle through that, because as you mentioned, Ms. Timmons, it's education gets us a long way in life, and when you lose your ability to be educated, or you have to alter your life to not pursue an education and do something just to stay alive. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. I come from a very poor neighborhood up north, and I know what it's like for people who have had to struggle and had to make those decisions. My parents had to make decisions. My mother especially, she wanted to be a school teacher, but she couldn't afford to go to college until she was in her 50s. And she got her college degree in her 50s and began the teaching career that she always wanted to have. So a lot of that has happened to a lot of people, and the land trauma. And I don't think that there is enough of an appreciation, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this program, is to enlighten our community and our world about what's going on in that community and what happened to it, the history of it. I know I was just looking the other day, and Sapelo Island has some historical significance for something I read that was a lot of people didn't know. That's supposedly the first location in North America where there was a Catholic mass. I don't know how many Catholics know that, but yeah. But there's a lot, and we go from there into the acquisitions of the slaves coming there, and your direct descendants of those slaves, and the fact that you were able to acquire, your families were able to acquire property at the end of slavery, which I think is something tremendous, not unique, but tremendous, because I know that happened to certain folks in North Carolina also. Mm-hmm. But as we're about to close out here in a few minutes, I'd just like to get some closing statements from all of you that you feel from your heart that you want America and the world to know about the Harris Neck community.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for this great opportunity. And I would like to add to that I didn't know that I was suffering from trauma for a long time, until Dr. Osby brought it to my attention as to what I was feeling and all that I needed to get better, to face some of these demons. I would say that was just haunting and hurting so badly, and that was to fight back positively, do what we can, and never ever let it fall into a demise, be forgotten. Just keep fighting, pushing, praying, working. And that's what we're doing. So I must say that I am so appreciative of Dr. Osby bringing that to my attention, and thank you too. And we're going to continue to work with the Fish and Wildlife, with the government, because I do believe that we have made some wonderful progress. I know that we have, and we're just going to continue moving forward.
I'm just hoping someday that we can get Dr. Osby on this program, because she can talk about land trauma like nobody I know. She's educated. Awesome. Yes, she is. Awesome. Yes, she is.
Awesome.
Really?
Yeah, well, I'd like to also thank you and for this opportunity. And I'd just like to say to America, I am hoping and praying that you are listening, and that you can maybe identify with some of these trauma that people may be going through, and you may have no idea as to why they may be behaving or acting. And I think that's why Direct Descendants of Harris Neck is so important, our organization, to educate and to be a voice for these type of acknowledgments, so that people can have a better compassion for what's going on in our community, in the Black community, because it's not always what you might think it might be. So I thank you. I thank you for allowing us to voice that.
Anytime, and please feel free to come back. Mr. Dunham, you're the liaison for this. And thank you for serving as the communication vehicle for us. We really appreciate that. Probably a lot of this wouldn't be happening without you. So thank you for that. Do you have anything you would like to share?
The only thing I would like to say is that I won't call myself much of an outsider. I've known this friend most of my life, but I will say that the Harris Neck community, as it stands now, is so resilient. And you see so many great things happening from the community just through our partnership between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the community alone. Ms. Fran talked about earlier with or Ms. Margaret talked about with the plant workshop. and gullah plant identification that, their niece is doing through the Fish and Wildlife Service and the University of Georgia, through the events that we've held here. We've helped to, do partnerships and have events that have served people, from teachers in the region to, children that are coming here and learn about the refuge, bringing people who haven't been here to learn about their, heritage and things of that nature. So great things are happening with this partnership, and I'm glad to see it continuing, and only great things are to come from here on out.
And Reverend Norman, we have another board member, a board member here.
Okay.
Sister Anna, come on.
Come on over. Let us see your
Come
face.
on over.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are
How are
you?
Fine. How are you? We see you.
Yes.
Great to see you as well.
We haven't heard from you. How can you share some of your feelings with us?
Oh, this is an exciting time for me because got to meet friends and the family, and has become a part of the family. And the trauma that they're experiencing is something that I've lived through, and so I kind of feel that weight on my shoulder as well. I'm originally from West Africa, Liberia.
All right.
Where we had a civil war in our country and were torn away. So I know what it is to just get up and have to leave everything that you have struggled all your life for, honestly struggle for. So I'm very happy to engage with the community and help her and just heal, as she's saying, because we carry that trauma with us and we don't understand that we have it. And I'm listening here and I'm feeling that trauma that I have of having to leave home and everything my parents and ancestors have worked hard for, to start a new life. So I'm proud to be a part of it, and pray blessings on the descendants that they'll be able to recover what they honestly theirs. So thank you for that opportunity to speak today.
I'm glad you mentioned that you're from Liberia. I met a group of people from they're here out near where I live, and they're all from Liberia, and they have a support group that I'm hoping to have on our program here in the very near future. But I really thank you all. I know that this wasn't something that you wanted to do, but I'm sure it wasn't easy for any of you to relive and recount, and to stand as beacons to the world, explaining who you are, why you are, and what's going on in your community. And I thank all of you. I really do. And in closing, this is unprepared, but as I listened to Ms. Timmons speak about being in trauma and not knowing that you were in trauma, it's what came to my mind is that God works in mysterious ways. It's strange and it was unplanned, but about 2 programs before this, we had Miss Carolyn Maul McKinstry, who is, for want of better words, she was one of the saddest. She survived only by the grace of God the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and she said it was years in Birmingham, Alabama. Excuse me, in Birmingham, Alabama. But she said it was years before she realized that she was suffering from the trauma of that event. So I truly understand when you say that you were suffering from trauma but didn't know it. And I don't think there's a greater appreciation of that. Last program, we had Miss Marie Hardy, who's written a book called Against All Odds But God. And she talked about the trauma that she had in life and how she overcame that. But it took years. It's not something that happens overnight. And the trauma of not only land trauma, but the trauma of the compound that with the trauma of obviously abject racism. It's just difficult to overcome, especially when you have today people who will come out and say that racism doesn't exist or there's no longer any racism. Uh, my goodness, if there was no racism, you're a lot of what you're talking about would have been adjusted. The land reacquisition and the living conditions all would have been resolved decades ago,
I agree.
rather than you're still having to struggle with this. And I think the world and America and even some of our folks here in Georgia have to understand that. And I'm, uh, that's another reason why I commend you for again, all of you for being beacons, to shine a light on what's going on in the Harris Neck community. And I really hope this speeds up the process
Yeah.
where you get what you needed to make yourselves as whole as you can be. You're never going to be completely whole because there's so much that you lost during your lives, but to make you as whole as you can be. And I think all of you are people of faith, and that has helped you out and guided you. And again, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Brother Norman, you have
You're
to
right.
come to Harris Neck, okay? You have,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
and listen, when you come, hopefully it is before January because our brothers are still carrying on the oyster business, okay?
Oh,
From
wow.
my grandfather and my father. Oh my God, they have the best oysters in the world. I will not lie to you.
All right. All right.
And
Thank
crabs
you.
and shrimp.
And
Well,
crabs.
oysters. Those are their specialties. So when you come down, you're going to have a great time
Before January.
before January.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of our listeners and viewers. We didn't have a lot of questions, but I hope that's because we answered a lot of your questions and concerns. And this program, I will let you all know, is going to be archived on YouTube, so you'll be able to share this. It was so very, very, very informative, and I am sure that there are a lot of people, more than you know, who appreciate what you have just done today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we thank all you listeners, and we will see you again in about 2 weeks right here on Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network. Thank you. Peace out.
Yeah.